Hi, I'm Bruce Bolger. I'm the founder of the Enterprise Engagement Alliance, and we're dedicated to helping organizations of all sizes enhance performance through a strategic and systematic approach to managing people. Consider it total quality management for people. And this new discipline requires a lot of old disciplines: leadership, communications, values, culture, learning, and different methods like meetings. Meetings are a powerful engagement tool. So we have founded a special channel on the Enterprise Engagement Alliance Stakeholder Management channel, specifically on how to take meetings to the next level. And we're lucky to have Jackie Basco, who's one of the leading agents in the United States, line up speakers like our speaker today, John O'Hurley, who many of you know through Seinfeld as Jay Peterman, but who has a lot more lessons to share than those that we've enjoyed in 85 countries. So I just want to thank our sponsor today, Pulse Experiential Travel, which provides experiences for millions of business people and others around the world, and also our many customers. And finally, to remind everybody that we give away a ton of information. We're the how-to organization for implementation of stakeholder management. So thank you very much for enduring that. And I'm going to stop the share and get right to you, John. John, you have a program apparently for corporate speakers that's intriguing to any of us who are Seinfeld fans. The Peterman Guide to the Extraordinary Life. Can you tell us what that's about?
Well, well, my life changed, I would say, back in June 21st, 1991. I was traveling on a cruise ship across the North Atlantic, and we had just pierced the Arctic Circle. And because it was daylight saving, the sun was out much longer than it normally would be. And I found myself on the top deck of the cruise ship there, sitting next to a man who literally changed my life. He was what I would call an inherited grandfather. His name was Barry. And I had met him on the cruise that week and just found him to be one of the most engaging people that I've ever met in my life. And it turns out that he was a very successful man as well. He had devised a system of cross-referencing tires, replacement tires, with appropriate vehicles. Now, you think that would be a very simple thing to do, but somehow nobody had ever thought of it, and certainly not to the level that he had developed it. And so to say that Barry was a millionaire was probably cheating him by a couple of decimal points. He was quite successful. But that night, he and I were sitting over a glass of wine. And as we were watching that wonderful dusk hour that only the midnight sun can deliver, I asked him to what he owed his success. And he reached over and he grabbed my arm. And he said this to me. He said, "John, you've got two choices in life. You can have an ordinary life, or you can have an extraordinary life. And that's it. Those are your choices. And it has nothing to do with power. It has nothing to do with money, but it has everything to do with the power of your choices." And with that, I said to him something I've said probably only to a handful of people in my life. I said, "I will know you for the rest of my life." And that was true. And sadly, it was too short. He passed away several years later to a very sudden, acute case of leukemia. And but he left me with a sense of a GPS, a sense of guidance, because all my life I had been addicted to great people. I always had, whether it was Paul Harvey or Earl Nightingale or any of the great speakers, I was always addicted to not only them, but the message. And I always wanted to live extraordinarily. And I think that's the common denominator of me with everybody that we're talking with today. I think we all want to live extraordinarily. Or let me put it another way. I don't think anyone chooses to live an ordinary life. Swinging on the middle rung like George Costanza.
So let me ask you before you get into this more. if I get the timing right, you had already led an extraordinary life by the time you met Barry. Didn't you say the date was 2001 that you met him?
No, it was actually 1991.
Oh, so this is
1990.
before you had entered the truly extraordinary part of your life. So how do you define extraordinary? Or I don't want to interrupt you. Perhaps that's part of explaining the Peterman Guide. So please go ahead.
Yeah, so it's, as I say, I don't think people want to live ordinary lives. I think they want to live extraordinary lives. I see it in, I have now an 18-year-old son, but I think back to when he was 5, 6, 7, 8, no matter what he held, any stick became a spear, became, a fishing rod, because he believed, like, his father, that every body of water held a fish, even the puddle at the end of the driveway. And, but it was somehow, as life moves on, there is a disconnect, and people move from the extraordinary to the ordinary. And I believe that we don't choose we don't choose to live extraordinary lives. We are destined for them. And I think that people choose ordinary lives. And I see that in, as time goes on, I see the dead stare in a million adult eyes as I'm stuck in traffic on the roadway, or I just look at people and I just say there's just nothing there. That spirit inside of them is dying to jump out, but they have disconnected totally, and they are okay living in an ordinary life. And I go, all right, well, that's their choice, but I'm on a different route. So for me, it was always about wanting to live extraordinarily. And so I thought about it, and I've done a great deal of thinking and writing. I've written several books in this to this um, direction, about the nature of what an extraordinary life would be. And what I've been able to decipher, and I've taken it from people that are living extraordinarily. Some are wealthy, some are not, some are well known, some are not. It didn't matter, because, as Barry said, it had nothing to do with money or power, but everything to do with the power of your choices. So I realized that it was something that was available to everybody. And so I was able to come up with the three elements that I found every person that I felt was living extraordinarily, the three elements that they all seem to possess. And I think I've been correct on this. And very simply, it comes down to the three elements of imagination, contemplation, and appreciation. Those simple elements. And here's the here's the kicker. You got to have all three. It's not one or two of, it's all three. Those three elements together complement each other to form the nature of what we would call someone who's living extraordinarily.
So you
So
don't have to be world famous.
no,
You don't have to be a super successful businessman. In fact, you could work at a waste management plant. But if you have an imagination or these three components, you're saying you can live an extraordinary life, and that's what we're missing.
it had nothing to do with money or power or anything. It will, by its very nature, make you more accessible to the world, and you will become more successful because of that. So success is kind of the wonderful accessory that comes along with the pursuit of living extraordinarily. Let me kind of go through each one of
Yeah.
these, the notion of what each of these elements is and how to identify it. Now, I begin with the notion of imagination. What you imagine has value. I'll say that again. What you imagine has value. And if you don't believe that, I want you to just turn this show off right now. And I want you to drop down to the ground and curl yourself into a little fetal ball, because I promise you, you will not succeed in any aspect of your life unless you value what you imagine. Now, I'm not talking about your rational mind. I'm talking about your imagination. Your imagination are the little pictures that you see in your mind. And what they are actually are a 24/7 assessment of who you are and what you are supposed to be. And it is constantly updating itself. It's a little laptop that's just buried somewhere inside that cerebellum that you have. And it is constantly updating and challenging you to say you should be going to this. It's not your rational mind. Your rational mind will lie to you. It will lie to you all the time because its job is to protect you. Its job is to keep you upright, standing upright and not falling flat on your face. But it will never challenge you. Your imagination is what challenges you. And that's the most important thing. And I will tell you this, if I have been a success in any aspect of my life, my career as a father, as an actor, it's because I listened only to my imagination. And
Well, this
I
is
go
so
back.
important. I want to drill into it a little bit more. So, are you saying that an imagination, in a sense, is almost my visualization of what my life could be?
Yeah,
So, in other
exactly.
words,
Exactly. Let me give you an example. Dancing with the Stars. That's a franchise that ABC can say is probably in the history of the television network. Nothing has exceeded that. They've done, I guess 40 seasons of it now, 20 years of success with it. I was on the first season of Dancing with the Stars. Not only was I on the first season, I was the first one that said yes to it. And I tell you, it happened because I got a call from ABC one day. They said, "Come to lunch. We want to pitch you a show." Well, I should have been suspicious right away. ABC doesn't take me to lunch, and they certainly don't pitch me shows. But I went to the Grill on the Alley in Beverly Hills, and there I walked into the restaurant, and there's half a dozen millennials with their laptops open, showing me a show that was over in England called Strictly Come Dancing. And it was a big success over there, competitive ballroom dancing with celebrities. And I wanted to ask for the check right away because I'm the guy I'm the guy at the wedding reception who, once the music and the dancing starts, goes to the back wall with his glass of Chardonnay and says, "Knock yourselves out, Shriners." it's not my time. So anyway, I came from a little bit of a backstep to this. And so they said it's about competitive ballroom dancing. I said, well, it looks absolutely gorgeous. 65-piece orchestra, live music, great choreography, beautiful bodies, and the whole show just screamed success. And I said, I'll be happy to host it. And they said, no, we want you to do it. I said, no. And I said, no, come on now, I'll host it. They said, no, we want you to do it. Well, here's the part that comes in. I always live by my imagination. And immediately the picture of me being a success in that format was right in front of my eyes. And I went, damn, this is one of those times that I was not happy with my imagination. And I said, all right, I'll do it. Who else have you got? They said, you're the first person we've asked. But now that we've got you, we know we can get Evander Holyfield. Now, I went, what? What? And now that I realized what they were doing was using that midsummer replacement series on ABC to give America something they've been wanting for more than 20 years, which was the Evander Holyfield, John O'Hurley matchup together on the level playing field of ballroom dancing. And if you don't remember that first season, I actually took the champ out in the third round with my foxtrot. So, but jokes aside, there was an example of my imagination and something that I truly was uncomfortable with doing. But for some reason, my imagination said yes. And I could see the picture as clear as day in my eye, or in my mind's eye. I could see it. And so I had to say yes to it. Now, I can say the same thing about every aspect of my life.
Well, let me stop on 1 second on that one, because didn't that turn out to be a unique success for you to boot? It was like, if I recall,
well, I won the first season. And not only did I win the first season, but there were such problems with the voting protocol on the show that they ended up having to redo the final episode into a dance-off, which kind of meant that I turned something as elegant as ballroom dancing into the WWF, and but it was a wonderful launching thing because it really kind of people knew me as Jay Peterman then on Seinfeld, and they didn't know me as John O'Hurley. So it's like I got my name back. I guess that's what you could say.
And you, in a sense, you stopped. I kind of, not that I know anything about your business, but like not poor George Costanza. He's always been George. You were able to completely rebrand yourself, and that was not an easy thing to do after you had such a iconic brand.
Yeah, it's that's a very good point that you made. Yeah, as I say, I got my name, my brand, and I became a brand, and I took that off into other arenas as well. In hosting, I did Family Feud for 5 years. Once again, an imagination. That was simply something because I hadn't thought of doing game shows at the time, and but that was something that popped in there. So, getting back to the point about the nature of imagination, um, it is the success factor. It cannot lie to you. Your imagination cannot lie to you because it doesn't know how to. All it is that 24/7 assessment of who you are and what you're supposed to be. And I truly, truly believe that my imagination also is the only way that God can talk to me. And so I use that message that comes through the pictures in my mind through my imagination as the thing that I should be doing because for some reason that's the next chapter in this crazy little novel called me.
Well, we're going to get to the second piece of your advice in 1 second, but to kind of summarize on imagination, and again, people, you can follow up on John's work, but as I get this, it's really, in a summarize, you could almost say, first off, dare to dream. If something really feels right, and tell me if I'm getting this wrong, and you visualize that, don't brush it off because that might be the real you. And second, it also takes a little bit, to me, the Bob Marley wisdom of never lose your sense of wonder. You can take that with you wherever you are in the worst day. So let's get on to your second piece of insight.
Sure. Before I get there, I want to close with just close that first element with this statement that what you imagine has value. Begin with that, and you'll always lead yourself down the correct road. The second element of that is contemplation. It's the thing I like to talk about the most because I think it's the most important. Just the nature of being able to live in the present moment. And what I mean by that is that we have been, as human beings, we are saddled with the burden of time. It's the cause of all of our stress. When we worry too much about the past, we live in shame. When we worry too much about the future, we're living with anxiety. But it's only when we live in the present moment that all of a sudden we notice the sense of peace and we have the opportunity to embrace the wonder that is around us all the time that we fail to observe. And I'll go back to my son. About the same time, 6 or 7, I had him with me one summer when I was on Broadway. And I took him over to the park every day and we kicked a ball around, and it really was his backyard, and had the most wonderful time there. And then one day I said to him, I said, Will, instead of kicking the ball around today, you and I are going to go over there by Tavern on the Green and sit there in the benches. Okay? And so he says, okay, Daddy. So we went over and we sat down. And I said, I'm not going to say anything to you, Will. I said, I just want you to tell me things you see that are interesting. And he started pointing out stuff that was fascinating to him. He saw bicycles, he saw tricycles, he saw unicycles, he saw horse-driven horse carriages. He would run up to the edge of the road and he'd say, excuse me, sir, what's the name of your horse? He learned 12 horses' names inside of a half an hour. And as we sat back down, I said to him, that may be the most important lesson that you have ever learned. We learned it together. And it was the notion of just living in the present moment and realizing that there is a sense of wonder going on around us at every second of our lives. What we fail to embrace it because we are too busy buried in our cell phones. And I will say that as he and I were sitting on the benches, he and I were the only 2 people that were looking up. Everybody else was looking down at their cell phone, missing the entire great mandala of what's going on around us. This big human circle on the roadway that runs through the center of Central Park, and at any one moment, it's just an absolute circus of humanity. That's what I mean by the sense of wonder, that by living in the present moment. If I'm too worried about what's going to happen, or if I'm too worried about what has happened, I cannot experience what is happening. And that's the most important part. And if you think about living an extraordinary life, we have been given a universe, not only magnanimous in its quality and its size when we think of nebulas and galaxies, but also when we shrink it down into the nano area, that area inside of us that is so small we can only theorize that it exists by a theorem or an equation. I mean, that's how amazing the minuscule nature of our universe is. And it's only embraceable when we're living in the present moment. Before I
I
walk
don't have
on,
time to get to your third, John, so
sure.
because your time is valuable, but let me sum up or let me ask you this. Isn't it, in a sense, what we're missing is that every life is an epic novel? Every life is an incredible Broadway show. And I live in New York and where we enjoy theater greatly. But you know what? I always tell my friends, you never have to go to the theater. You never have to go to a movie. You don't even have to read a book. Just look around you. Every life is a story. Is that in a kind of way you're telling us, in a sense?
Bingo, bingo, bingo. It's there. It's there all around us. Before I walk on stage every night, I say one prayer, just one simple prayer. I say, God, let me be surprised. And that's it. And what it does is just the simple notion of saying that relaxes me. And now I know I'm out there on that stage to find my surprise. And I've done the musical Chicago on Broadway more than 2,000 times as Billy Flynn there.
Yeah.
And I will tell you that that role is 2,000 times richer than when I started it, for the simple notion of saying that prayer, God, let me be surprised. Because every night on stage, I've always found my surprise. And I mean, something that never happened before, something that pushed me into an area that I hadn't thought of for the character. Someone answered me in a different way, or something more humorous or ridiculous happened on stage. But every night, there was a surprise.
Well, John, that takes courage. It does. So let's go to your next point.
The last one is the one that I had the most difficult time with, and that's, I knew it was there, and I knew that appreciation was absolutely such an important part of this notion of living extraordinarily, to be grateful for everything that we have around us. And I learned that one day when I was with my son, once again. As you can see, he's taught me quite a bit. But he was 4 years old, and it was his first day at school, kindergarten. And the school was a kindergarten through 6th grade. So in the schoolyard that day, was they all were saying their Pledge of Allegiance and then heading off to their appropriate classes. All of the little kids that were in kindergarten were standing in line, and every one of them was petrified. And I thought to myself, isn't that interesting? That every one of those children had infinite value, but infinite brokenness, that none of us was perfect. And I think that's what the nature of appreciation is that to recognize the inherent value and the inherent brokenness in every human being. We all have value, but none of us is perfect. And we're all little broken toys at any one part of our life. And so the nature of appreciation is to embrace that. It's the fact, and it allows me to look at every human being as partially broken. And with my sense of empathy, I have a totally different relationship with that person, that a simple smile is sometimes all they need. But the importance of realizing that value and the brokenness and the incompleteness of each of us, and the sense that we are all just bozos on the bus. That's all we are. And I think that gives you the completion of what I mean by living extraordinarily, because you are now grateful for everyone and everything around you.
And it makes you happier every day, doesn't it? There's so much packed into this. I want to pivot this to business a little bit, because I think these three lessons apply to business.
Extraordinarily.
And I don't want to take the rest of the time to do that. I'm going to ask you about a little bit. I have to about Seinfeld. My kids would be pissed off if I didn't. One of the things that we all noticed about the show was the continual joking about business. All
Mhm.
sorts of insert, my favorite business was Kramerica, but Kruger, they were all great businesses. And of course, the famous episode where Kramer gets a job and he's just trying to get ahead. John, let me ask you, do you think the reason that so many of us find that funny, is that it's sadly true? You've been in
It is
business.
sadly true, and let me take another step further and tell you that the entire character of J. Peterman was built on a gentleman that I worked for um, back when I took a little 5-year hiatus out of college. I graduated with my degree in acting. I was the only theater graduate my senior year, so consequently, I won the theater award. Um, and but I got scared to death of the business of acting because I knew what I was doing as an actor. I just didn't know how to make a living at it, and I didn't know anybody. So I went and curled up my tail and went back home, and I lived with my parents for a while, and I went into the next most theatrical thing I could think of, which was public relations and advertising, and I started doing very, very well in that, and I started going, wait a minute here, wait a minute, wait a minute, I'm being sucked up an echelon here that really isn't where I want to go, and and so but I did happen to work for a gentleman, as I said, who was he was one of the most bizarre human beings I've ever met in my life. Yet he was my boss. And I mean, he had like a little wooden block, and he found a large cockroach, and so he put a pin through the cockroach and pegged it to that little piece of wood that was on his desk. And I went, and it stayed there for years, for the couple of years that I was there, it never moved. And I just said, well, this is just endemic of the character of the man. He was as crazy as Peterman, and he was just this sense of inspired lunacy. He always had an idea, but he had one of the most bizarre personalities, characters that I had ever seen in my life. So when the Peterman character was presented to me, I already I already
You'd
had
written
him
them.
fit. I had him fit, form, and function already scribed out carefully because I had grown up around this man, and it was rather easy to add in the touch of lunacy that we needed.
Now, I mean, you've been involved with businesses. And by the way, folks, he's also an expert on dogs. I don't know whether you know, but he's the host of the National Dog Show, written 3 books on dogs. But I do want to get to this a little bit because you are a business person. Am I wrong, but are we wasting a lot of money in business with all the stupidity that I sometimes think that businesses are almost little fiefdoms where the CEO is like a Peterman and they're good CEOs, right? But then there's a lot who just think this is my fiefdom. So I'm going to
Mhm.
treat my employees this way, my customers this way. And John, I have a feeling there's a tremendous amount of inefficiency in capitalism that we're missing.
Well, let's begin with our government. I think that is probably that's the archetype of inefficiency. And then from there we can certainly move down into some of our larger businesses and see the inefficiency that's endemic there. But I agree with you 100%. I think that there is a great deal of inefficiency in business, but I think there's also people don't realize that when something as simple as what I described as the Peterman Guide to the Extraordinary Life, the how it makes you so much more appealing and open and accessible to the rest of the world that you cannot help but succeed at the highest level because of it. So I would go back to that and say parenthetically that the living by the imagination, the contemplation, and the appreciation are probably the easiest way to get ahead in your business, but also to look at your business as a bastion of common sense. Um,
Thank you.
and
Yeah,
that seems to be what is missing
missing.
right now. Yeah, is there's so much common sense that I have a business that I'm a founder of right now, which is uh, culture changing. I have a technology that takes any form of waste and turns it into large amounts of energy, but with absolute zero emissions. It's portable, it's scalable, it's stackable, and here's the
Wow.
kicker: it powers itself, so it's entirely off the grid. So we don't need landfills anymore. We don't need sewage treatment plants.
Wow.
We can do things like coal and oil fracking slurry and
Name of the
all of our
company?
waste.
What's
It's
it?
goldsealindustries.com.
Thank you. I'm going to, Jackie, John was so engaging that I really forgot to ask you, and now I already know the answer, but I'm going to ask you anyway. What made you recommend John? As you know, we're highlighting people that that we believe can really help make a difference at corporate events and shake things up. Why did you recommend John?
One of the reasons why I met John, he did 12 years of just, he's got such a big heart. He came to our charity event for the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and I got to know him. And he said he was a keynote speaker, and I thought, oh, a celebrity speaker. But when I hired him, like for the American Water Association, I had a whole different vision of John. And the speech was amazing. He took the people to a different level, and he taught them how to manifest the things that they want and they need to be doing, and had them really look deep inside themselves. By the time he was done speaking, it was so informational, spiritual. Men, women were crying, and they saw a whole different side of John. They didn't love him just because he was Mr. Peterman and John O'Hurley. They loved him for the information that he left them with. And it was, I can't say enough about John as a speaker, as a person, and a humanitarian, and an entertainer and performer. And he's one of my favorite people. And not because we're doing this podcast, and I mean that.
Well,
And
you
he's an
recommended him for
incredible,
this very reason. And I have to say, John, I'm sorry we didn't have more time to talk about the applications of really the Peterman legacy here, because I think they apply incredibly to business. And is it fair to say, John, in concluding that your imagination may have been what stopped you from getting typecast as an actor? Because I think at that stage you could have been typecast because you were literally iconic. Uh,
Well, that's interesting. I think what happened really was more the opportunities came to me, and I just regard every opportunity as a way that God is speaking to me. And I don't know I don't know how the book ends, so I have to keep writing it.
Well, John, thanks so much for helping us tell it. And Jackie, thank you so much for inviting John to be on the show. And this will be published next week
thank you,
and will go
Bruce, and
into
thank you,
our
John.
library of wisdom.
Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you. I look forward to seeing you in 2 days.
Mhm.